The B-2 bomber, feared by its enemies for its invisibility, is still considered a legend even today. And now, I'm going to tell you the story of the engineer who spent 40 years fighting to make this aircraft a reality. Enjoy the documentary. A genius who never received a university education and learned engineering through hands-on experience, Jack Northrop had already made a name for himself in the aviation world in his early 20s by playing a key role in the design of legendary aircraft such as the Lockheed Vega. But while studying aircraft designs, Jack Northrop realized something important. Propeller-driven airplanes were deeply flawed. They could not fly at very high altitudes, could not reach sufficient speeds, consumed enormous amounts of fuel, and produced loud noise that made them easy targets for enemies. He believed that if the propellers were eliminated and a smoother surface design with less drag could be created, both the speed and noise problems would disappear. This idea occupied Jack Northrop's mind for many years, and in his spare time outside of work, he began developing a project he called the Flying Wing. He spent 23 years working on this concept, and in 1939, he founded his own independent company, Northrop Corporation. Under the roof of his own company in California, he produced the first real prototypes, the Northrop YB-35 and the Northrop YB-49. The idea was simple, yet revolutionary. A flying wing, a massive aircraft made from a single wing without a tail. Less drag, lower fuel consumption, and far more efficient flight. It would no longer remain just a dream. By 1940, a runway was built right next to the factory so the aircraft could be tested. That runway is still in use today. Jack Northrop's unusual aircraft had apparently attracted the attention of military officials because they sent experienced war pilots to fly it. Interest in the project grew rapidly. On the 3rd of July 1940, the YB-35 took off for the first time over the dry lake bed of Baker Dry Lake, California. But there was one major problem. The technology simply wasn't ready. There were no computer-assisted flight systems. The aircraft were unstable, and pilots often lost control during flight. Since the YB-49 prototype was also considered unsatisfactory, all tests were stopped in 1949. The authorities were disappointed. They informed Jack Northrop that they could no longer support the project and parted ways with him. Instead of receiving support, Northrop was left completely alone. His dream had been shelved. Years of hard work felt wasted. It seemed as though he had sacrificed decades of his life for nothing. He decided not to waste any more time. In 1952, at only 57 years old, he resigned from the company he had founded himself, Northrop Corporation. He believed his projects had been blocked by political games, and he became so disillusioned with the aviation world that for more than 25 years, he almost never applied to another military project again. But he never forgot the flying wing. Exactly 18 years later, in 1970, the United States found itself facing serious problems with the Soviet Union. The Soviet S-200 air defense missile systems were devastating American warplanes. The Pentagon's need became clear. Not a fast bomber, an invisible one. A bomber capable of penetrating S-200 air defense systems unseen and destroying the most critical targets. In 1979, one of the most secretive military programs in history was launched. The Advanced Technology Bomber Program, also known as ATB. When Northrop heard about the program, he realized the years he had spent in silence had not been wasted. He had continued improving his dream aircraft all along. With advancing technology, he had integrated computerized flight stabilization systems into his project. When the day came to present the designs, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman all entered the competition. Lockheed appeared to be the favorite because they had already proven stealth technology with the Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk. But Northrop possessed a forgotten idea, the flying wing. When officials saw the project, they were astonished. Standing before them was an aircraft that looked nearly complete. The project was approved, and testing began. During the tests, the Pentagon discovered that the flying wing design scattered radar waves in an extraordinary way. And thus, the Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit was born. One of the project's most important figures was John Cashin. Cashin and his team spent years calculating exactly how radar waves would bounce off the aircraft. Sharp corners were eliminated, surfaces were curved, engine intakes were hidden, and exhaust heat was reduced. The result? A massive strategic bomber that appeared on radar no larger than a bird. But the B-2 was not just a technological project. It was also a black project. The engineers working on it could not even tell their wives what they were building. For years, they worked inside windowless rooms under extreme security measures. And finally, the 22nd of November, 1988, when the hangar doors opened, journalists saw a gigantic black aircraft with no tail, resembling a giant bat. 1 year later, on the 17th of July, 1989, the B-2 took to the skies for the first time. Computers made hundreds of tiny adjustments every second to keep the aircraft stable in flight. But this technology came at a cost. A single B-2 cost approximately $2 billion. Originally, hundreds were planned to be built. But on the 26th of December 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the Cold War came to an end. As a result, only 21 B-2 bombers were ever produced. Today, these aircraft are based primarily at Whiteman Air Force Base. And remarkably, this enormous bomber is operated by only 2 pilots. Some missions last more than 40 hours. Inside the aircraft are sleeping quarters, a microwave oven, and even a small rest area. Calling it a flying home would not be entirely wrong. The aircraft saw combat for the first time during the Kosovo War in 1999. B-2 bombers took off from the United States, crossed the Atlantic Ocean, struck targets in Serbia, and returned home. Nearly 30 hours of non-stop missions, often without ever being detected by radar. Mission accomplished. In 1980, shortly before his death, Jack Northrop was secretly shown a model of the B-2. Sitting in his wheelchair, he held the model in his hands and looked at it silently for a long time. According to those present, he finally said, "Now I know why God has kept me alive for so long." The engineer who spent 40 years chasing his dream never lived to see the B-2 fly with his own eyes. At least not in this world. But before he died, he saw the idea he had devoted his entire life to become reality.